again, for the high crime of selling something without government permission, they treated this like he was like a serial killer.
Yeah, or like an international arms dealer.
Yeah, or yes. I mean, it really is. I mean, it is staggering. We are the Arms Attorneys. Today we are talking about some breaking news. A grieving widow has sued the ATF, and boy, do we hope she collects a big check. Stick around. We're going to talk about what the situation was, all of the numerous counts she has brought in her lawsuit, and how the government really, really messed up this situation. But before we get started, show your support for the Second Amendment by hitting the like button. And Texans, go to armedattorneys.com, sign up for our newsletter. By the end of this week, we are going to send you a newsletter letting you know what's dead, what's alive at the Texas Capitol, how your gun rights are likely to change. It's probably the most important Texas information that we have ever put out and that you're going to get for a while here from anybody. So sign up. You're going to get that newsletter this weekend. I think it's very, very important. armedattorneys.com.
All right, and the case we're talking about today, and we did a video about this at the time that it happened, but this was an ATF raid on everybody's calling him the airport administrator, the Malinowski case, if you are familiar with this. And this was a no-knock raid, very violent, ended in someone losing their life. And all right, we know the government they're going to claim sovereign immunity, all these things. It seems like the government can push people around, do whatever they want. And this related to, the allegation that he was an unlawful dealer of firearms, that he didn't have a federal firearms license. He was selling too many guns in the ATF's view. And so, natural reaction to that is
murder.
Take his life, right? Well, according to the ATF, that's the other thing that bugs. It doesn't matter if you are a poor person, rich person, everybody, the ATF treats you equally and will kill you and your dog. I don't like that.
No. So yes, so taken as true, which I don't know. The ATF had some undercover guys investigating him. They seem to have some information that he might have been engaging in the business. It's not my investigation. It's not my case. I don't know. But let's assume that it's true. Let's assume he was an unlawful dealer.
Death penalty.
Death penalty. What they did and how they enacted this raid and this arrest warrant it's criminal.
Yes.
So I guess let's talk through. So on May 15th of this year, Mr. Malinowski's widow filed this lawsuit. It is 238 pages long.
Yeah.
Much of it attachments, but I would still say the meat of this suit is like 70 some odd pages.
That is for those listening, that is a long petition.
It's a long petition. She's got a lot to say, and it gives us a really good idea of what happened when this warrant was executed, and we're going to talk through all that. But first, a little bit of the legal side. It was brought under the Federal Tort Claims Act because the government gets to tell us when we're allowed to sue the government.
Yeah, and so the Federal Tort Claims Act, and a lot of states have something similar where it's like, all right, you've been hurt by the government. Well, we are going to provide this remedy here. You just can't straight up sue us for damage. You need to exhaust all your other remedies before we even get there. And this is one of those low-level remedies that the federal government provides. We're not talking about, this isn't a Section 1983 deprivation of rights claim, because maybe there's alternative relief in one of these other statutes. So yes, this is the Federal Tort Claims Act. And like I said, a lot of your states probably have something very similar to this. And they do a lot of wonky things. Think about, the normal statute of limitations for personal injury, typically 2 years. And, it can depend on where you're at, but they'll say, hey, you got to sue, you got to let us know very quickly that you were hurt, or else you are not entitled to a remedy. And what the federal government does is they lean on this because, all right, you didn't exhaust your other remedies. Well, if you were to later bring a Section 1983 claim, they'd say, hey, guess what? You could have got relief over here. So guess what? We don't even have to address your deprivation of rights claims because you didn't try to take a bite at the apple over here. So I'm going to read the elements to you real fast. So this says, individuals who are injured or whose property is damaged by the wrongful, negligent act of a federal employee acting within the scope of his or her official duties might file a claim with the government for reimbursement for the injury or damage. In order to state a valid claim, the claimant must demonstrate that 1, he was injured or his property was damaged by the federal government employee. 2, the employee was acting within the scope of his official duties. 3, the employee was acting negligently or wrongfully. And 4, the negligent or wrongful act approximately caused the injury or damage of which he complains. The claimant must also provide documentation establishing that the claim satisfies all other elements of the Federal Tort Claims Act. So that's kind of the general background on all this.
Right. And so really what is in dispute here, right? We've got the government. We've got the government acting in their official government capacity. We have to just establish negligence or other wrongful act, because once established, I mean, a man is dead. It was in fact the proximate cause. It's not as though he like was so depressed after the raid that he wasn't looking around and he got struck by a car because he was so distracted from all of the bad things in his life. Like they shot him. So that is why he is no longer with us. That is proximate cause. So the only thing we're really looking to establish here is, were they negligent or did they otherwise act wrongfully? And boy, oh boy, does she have a list of reasons why and how. First, I'll tell you that this case is brought on behalf of herself and on behalf of his estate. So basically what that means is she is bringing her own claims, like, hey, you injured me in this way. And she's also bringing his claims posthumously, as his representative of his estate. You injured my husband in these ways as well. Those are both very important, but they are separate and distinct, and why we have so many counts here. So I'm going to take you through a little bit of the factual narrative before we start going through the counts that she's alleged.
Let's do it.
All right. So we have 13 agents who have arrived before 6 in the morning to execute an arrest warrant against an individual who, did he have any idea that he was a target?
No, he did not receive a target letter.
He did not receive
Which
a
is
target
unusual.
letter. That is unusual. And like, they have been doing all this undercover work. I mean, they were, again, for the high crime of selling something without government permission, they treated this like he was like a serial killer.
Yeah, or like an international arms dealer.
Yeah, or yes. I mean, it really is. I mean, it is staggering.
Yeah, and this happens a lot, and this has happened to folks that we have worked with. They'll come home, they'll find an ATF agent's card on their door. Obviously you don't want to speak to the law enforcement directly. Always communicate through an attorney. And then when we kind of drill down and figure out what it's all about, what it results in most of the time is like a no-no letter, as we like to call it. Like,
don't do this anymore.
Hey, it's like hey, you are on notice that you are, we think you're an unlawful dealer in firearms. Stop immediately, or we're going to take some kind of action against you. But it usually starts with some kind of contact and then some kind of correspondence.
Yes, it doesn't normally start with an arrest.
Yeah.
So he has no idea this is coming. They show up in the dark of night still, and it's very, very early in the morning. It's pre-dawn. There's 13 agents, and they get there. They start to stage, and then they walk up to his door, and the first thing they do is cover his Ring camera with tape so that he cannot see that it is federal agents outside.
No, they're just officer safetying the situation.
I mean, that's the thing. And the widow goes through, and she's like, look, he has no criminal history. He has no violent history. I mean, is this the way you treat someone who is not accused of any act of violence and never has been? You don't want them to know it's police?
Yeah.
That doesn't seem right. And then it gets worse from there, because we have, and this is a large part of her negligence claim, essentially, is you did not have reason not to properly knock, announce, and wait for entry to be admitted and denied. So what they did is they covered up everything that said police. There is no body cam footage. There's some allegation that they announced police. There is, but it's, I think, sketchy at best. They covered up their one placard that would have showed that they were in fact ATF. They left on the front porch. It was a ballistic shield. So there's no indication other than perhaps some verbal warning that they're police. They cover up the camera and they go in. Richard, I do that at your house. What do you do?
Yeah, I'm sure shots are getting fired. I mean, it's not.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say other than I think my door's getting kicked in by a bunch of I don't know, gang members. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, you are awoken from sleep to people, and like there was he had like a glass door and then a wooden door. So like imagine you hear the glass shattering, you hear the wood splintering. There are people rushing inside your house. It might take you a minute to figure out what's going on. Did he get a minute?
No, no, I think it was like 45 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. He literally didn't even get a minute from the time they put the tape over his camera to the time that that fatal shot was fired was 48 seconds.
Wow. Yeah. That's
So
brutal.
how do you get out of bed and you're so, I mean, I am certain from the facts alleged in this petition that the ATF's going to respond and say, well, he had a gun in his hand.
Sure.
Wouldn't you?
Yeah, yes, I would.
So anyway, so let's talk about, I mean, those are the basic facts. There's lots of, you can pull this case. It is worth reading the facts in full. We do not have time to go through all of the facts here, but let's start, we're the lawyers, right? So let's start talking about the legal counts here.
Yeah. Well, and one thing I wanted to add briefly is, and I'm sure you've had clients that, we have clients who are accused of murder, accused of aggravated assault, accused of all kinds of things. And, when you have an attorney intervention, maybe we've saved a life because I'll have a detective call me and say, hey, guess what? We put out a warrant out for your guy's arrest. Will you have himself turn himself in? We say, absolutely. They'll be turning themselves in within 24 hours. That's a safe, not only is it convenient to the client because they kind of turn themselves in on their terms, but wow, that's so much safer and reasonable.
So much safer, but I don't think safety is what they were going for.
No, so let's go through these counts. We'll start with count one, fail to knock and announce. Count two, unlawful entry. Count three, and if you want to talk about anything as I'm going, just let me know. Count three, excessive force. Count four, illegal detention of wife.
I'm gonna stop you there.
Okay.
Because generally speaking, if you are on premises when the police are executing a search warrant, you're gonna be detained there while they do it. Even if you don't live there, even if you are not involved in this situation at all. And so that one initially struck me, but they detain her there for like 3 hours. They won't let her ride in the ambulance with her husband, which is really, as a wife, really hurts me in my guts. And the whole time, they're not actually executing the search warrant. They're just making her stand on her front curb. So I actually don't know that that's a good claim. I don't know that's something that's going to win in court. But just for anyone who's like, well, isn't that sort of, aren't they kind of allowed to do that? Well, they kind of are, but essentially her allegation here is, you weren't searching at the time. Why were you detaining me?
Count five, wrongful death. That one makes sense. Count six, assault and battery. Count seven, negligence. Count eight, intentional infliction of emotional distress.
Stop.
So that's her claim.
That's her claim. Right. So she's got her illegal detentions. She's got her, right, IIED, we call it. Rare or no?
It's pretty rare.
It's real rare.
But I mean, this might be the case for it.
You know what I think, though? I think so, right. It is exactly as it sounds. You can bring a tort claim against someone for intentionally inflicting emotional distress upon you. However, it's my understanding, being a dumb dick criminal lawyer, that actually the NIED claims are more successful when brought. That's negligent infliction of emotional distress. So you could just imagine the difference in those. You're proving either I wanted to make you suffer, and so I did this thing in front of you. It's almost always like watching a loved one die.
And the reason people plead that is there's a bigger damages model associated with it.
Oh, yes. Or versus you negligently did something in front of me that caused me emotional. It's just generally easier to prove the negligent one, as I understand it. But again, what do I know?
Both are not, I'll say, great. I talked, and I'm sure you have people who want to sue Happy Society. Oh yeah, they inflicted my emotional distress. The car repair took too long, and this caused lots of stress. That's not what they're talking about. They're talking about like digging up your loved one and dragging them in front of you, and like, haha, I dug up your loved one. Like it's real. Yeah, it's real egregious behavior.
Yeah. It's really, really bad. Okay. And then there's more counts. Those are all under Arkansas law, and they're pretty duplicative. So I don't even know that we need to go through.
We'll just go through it real fast. Count 9, manslaughter. Count 10, battery. Count 11, aggravated assault. Count 12, criminal mischief. Count 13, false imprisonment. So there's a lot of, when you think about a civil case, just to put it in a framework, each count is like a different crime on the civil side, the equivalent of it. So I mean, this is a lot of allegations.
It's a lot of allegations. Now, will the government? This is Trump's DOJ.
We'll see.
Will the government fight back? I mean, I think the answer is yes, right?
Yeah, they kind of have to.
They have to, right? And not only because the government has been sued, and also lawyers. Lawyers are never in the business of just rolling over and taking nonsense. I mean, our fight instinct comes out sometimes even when we don't want it to. But also, the government can't risk I think, setting the precedent.
Yeah,
Right?
but there's, and I think this is why it's important. I mean, these no knock, a lot of states have prohibited no knock, warrants, except under extremely limited circumstances. This is bad. This is bad policy and extremely dangerous.
This is extremely dangerous. So, I mean, I think the government will fight it. I really hope that they end up at least settling with her and not making her. That's the thing. Even as a lawyer, it's like litigate it. But as a human being, it's like, gosh, I hope they just pay her the whatever money she deserves and not make her go through this.
Yeah, and I hope part of that settlement is and they'll do this. They'll say we will change our policy.
Yes.
Hey, we don't need to be executing folks over unlicensed gun dealing. This is ridiculous.
Yes. Long and storied history, though that is, of the ATF.
Yeah.
Maybe we should cut it the out.
Yeah. But we hope you enjoyed this discussion. If you did, consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and help us fight the anti-2A algorithm by sharing this video.
And please continue to question and comment for us below. Until next time, we're the Armed Attorneys.